Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask another question about the Gear Up and TRIO programs. As I understand it, these are really the only significant programs that really aim toward completion and access issues. And that if these programs were running perfectly, you were all the way out at the edges of what you were able to accomplish, you get about 800,000 kids through in a year. So I have a scale question. By the year 2020, we know that about 65% of all jobs are going to require some kind of post-secondary education. And if we stay on our current trend line, we're going to be about 5 million young people short of meeting that goal. We also know our current college completion rates. We've got about 55% completing within 6 years. So this tells me we got to get more people into school, post-secondary. We've got to get more of them out. That is all the way through. And I'll just make the note off to the side. It has a powerful impact on things like whether or not they can pay their student loans. So all these pieces intersect. So the question I have is a scale question. The direction that we're headed says we're going to fall short in getting the kind of results that you are working toward. So what ideas do you have for how we can scale up? And we have to think about this in a cost-effective way. Are there specific things that you can identify where it's something we can scale up cheaply? Are there other approaches we should be using? That's really where I'd like to start this. Yes, ma'am.
TRIO programs have two components: access programs and completion retention programs. If you take the completion retention, however, as they've been administered, the grant sizes are equal regardless of setting, based on historical issues. However, if you take institutions that are serving tens of thousands of low-income students, they may have the same size of a grant, the same capacity as an institution that is serving or enrolling 600 low-income first-generation students. That issue of institutional capacity needs to be looked at if you want to scale up. The same thing is true at the pre-college level. If you're serving schools where 90% of the students are low-income first-generation students, there's issues of scale where we could serve the whole school at a lower cost per student and now we're not serving the whole school. I would defer to some of my Gear Up colleagues, but one of the problems I have with Gear Up is, and I think the TRIO community does, is because of the cohort model, you might serve a class of 9th graders, but then the next class of 9th graders doesn't get served. And in our view, you need a continuing federal commitment. And if you're going to be in a school, you should have that continuing federal commitment. So that would be a question that I think needs to be explored.
Very interesting. Ms. Sertich?
Just to speak to that scale and to speak to who we serve, how many we serve. In my area, and I'm in rural northern Minnesota, I serve 4 schools, and 48% of the school population that I serve are eligible for free and reduced lunch. So they are TRIO eligible students at these high schools, and that doesn't even take into consideration whether they have first generation status or not. So it's a larger number than that. My grant serves 15% of the students in my target schools, and more than half of them qualify for TRIO programs.
Okay, so I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing allocate the grant dollars differently, or at least look into whether you want to allocate differently. And the second one is you just got to put more dollars into it. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay.
And within the programs themselves, we need money to match the services that are in legislation for us to provide, and that we agree with, that we need to provide. But we're not able to fulfill all of those to the limits, as you said. which we'd like to do, and those obviously would get better results if we were able to do to the limits what we are written into legislation.
Can I clarify what I said? Sure. I'm not saying that we should take money from somebody and give it to somebody else. I'm just saying that where you have a huge number of unserved individuals, you need to look at how to expand your ability to serve those unserved individuals at colleges, particularly in terms of retention services and in high schools, particularly when you're serving only a small percentage of the students that you're serving. But to take it from a high school so that I'm not saying you take it from somebody else.
I understand your point, but we do have both questions on the table. I fully understand the notion. You just say, let's put more money into the program, but we're also going to have to find some scale here. It's not just going to be about pumping more dollars. It's just not going to happen. We may get some, willing to fight for it, but there are allocation questions that we're going to have to address. Mr. Giles, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a piece to that because I support both points that were made with an additional one that I think that is something that we need to explore further. So one of the things that Gear Up allows us to do is work with that cohort model where we can adopt a whole school. And I think that to your scale point, in addition to allocating the resources, the question is how you embed the work that we all do in the education system so that we're able to amplify, the expertise that we have by training teachers, training school counselors, training everybody within that institution from the leadership on down to support our work.
Yeah. Mr. Liang?
In terms of scaling up, definitely there's a dollar issue. In the 2011 competition, Gear Up competition, there's about 1 million students that are not served because of the reduction of the funding. So, but in Washington, what we're doing now is we have just, by the request of the governor and the legislature, our agency led the study of a roadmap for the next 10 years. And we find that our goal matches what you described in 2020, and we're saying in 2023, we're going to have 70% of students who with credentials. And so we're aiming high, and so in order to scale it up, Washington State is the only state that I know of to put actual money into Gear Up. And that could be a partnership. In that way, institution could be a partnership if they recognize the value of the Gear Up and TRIO services. So those are all potential ways to scale it up.
Interesting point. Dr. Harris?
So a few observations and at a fairly general level. You're talking about scale, and you're talking about getting millions of students to graduate. I think the only way to reach a goal like that is really through the community colleges, right? So the community colleges are important for several reasons. One is they are less expensive than the four-year college. Second, that's the kinds of jobs that are available are the ones that are more targeted towards two-year graduates right now. And that's where the students are, right, in vast numbers. If you're not going to move large numbers of students from being high school graduates to four-year college graduates. You can move students from being high school graduates to two-year college graduates much more readily. So I think having a focus on the two-year colleges is important. I had a paper, actually, that the Brookings Institution published a few years ago on this, things we might do at the community college level to encourage greater success there. And this included things like just simply basic stuff like reporting the persistence rates, publicly reporting those things and having some sort of a report card to put a little bit more pressure on getting students through those programs.
Thank you. Dr. Haskins?
If we think that we're going to have a shortage of people with degrees to meet the needs of our economy, the first place to look, I think, is low-income kids because A, they're less likely to go to school, and B, they're much more likely to drop out. The dropout rate is more like 2/3 from four-year institutions for kids from low-income families. And I think the most effective way to make sure that those kids don't drop out at that rate, thereby increasing the number of people with degrees and increasing the efficiency of our investments is to improve their performance during the K-12 years. That's the main reason they drop out. They're not prepared. The remedial programs don't work. So we lose a lot of money that we invest in those kids. And if we can improve that by improving K-12 education and preschool as well, we'll do better and we'll meet the need and we'll do it more efficiently.
All right, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.